wisdom isn't something mystical. Wisdom is really, for me, my definition of wisdom is actually going through pain and coming out the other end and being able to tell the story.
Sure.
Right? So wisdom to me is not this mystical thing. This is...
All right, welcome back to the podcast. This is your hosts, Craig and John, and we're in a little bit of a different location here today, which is a lot of fun. And
keeping it interesting.
Yeah, trying exactly
one location to the other.
Exactly. So we were talking over the weekend a little bit about the audiobook that you listened to, Seth Godin's. It was Leap. Is that
yeah, Leap of Faith, or Leap. It was more of a seminar it was a 2-hour seminar that he spoke. Which I love his way of looking. And Seth Godin is really a marketing genius, but a business genius,
right?
And he talks about things that are really kind of sit great with me that I've thought about many, many times. It's great when you listen to a great author or a great thinker, and you hear them talk about things. It's usually nothing that's new, but it's buttoned up and put together,
right?
And if you really, when it comes to those kind of things, you kind of have to digest and really absorb even quotes that you listen to. It's like, for me, I there's so many quotes out there. There's so many different authors that write stuff, or great, stoic philosophers from the past, from Marcus Aurelius, all that. But if you just read those and just jump to the next one and read the next one,
right,
you don't really absorb it. So, you feel the same way. Like you really have to kind of embrace sometimes these quotes or the teachings of people until you really absorb it and really let it kind of flow through you.
Right. Now I read the Purple Cow from Seth Godin.
Yeah.
I can't even think of how long ago that was now.
Right.
But I mean that kind of going with what you're saying is that, the Purple Cow was, he tells a story about how him and his family were traveling through like rural France, and, they're seeing all the cows up on the hill and say, hey kids, look, cow. And then after 10 miles or whatever, it's just like, oh, wow, more cows. And he got that thought of, what would happen if, the next hill that we go above, we see this purple cow up on the hill, kind of like sun shining on it. And like, that's the thing that stands out. It's like, wow, kids, look, purple cow. That's the thing that stands out amongst all the rest. Then you've had the other, other kind of philosophies of like, the blue ocean, red ocean, the philosophy is pretty much there. How do you make yourself stand out? But Seth Godin has done it in a really cool way in a lot of his content, where he takes these concepts, breaks them down, kind of reanimates it in a way, in a new frame of mind. I think it's a very, very interesting thing that he's been able to do well. And, there's other people out there too. We were just talking about a little bit about Iman Gadzhi with like kind of the stuff that he does with his content. And, he's obviously, he's younger than we are, by quite a bit. But the success that he has allows him to talk about things. And I think that's why people really like to listen to that and follow that, because it's not just hearsay or information passed down from one person to the next. And a lot of these people have been able to take these different quotes or these different ways of teaching and share it in a way that, hey, I'm successful. I've been very successful. And these are the principles, and these are the mindset things, or the stoic philosophies, or whatever it might be, that do work, that do make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And you don't have to create a new wheel. Yeah. In a lot of ways you have to, create a different version of the wheel or a better mousetrap. I know that's one of the, the lines that you say quite a bit is you don't have to, redevelop it. It's just think of something that would work a little bit better, more efficiently. Right.
And it's the delivery too. It's the delivery of a message, and who's giving the message. If you some of these gurus that are out there that are, touting, getting business quick and make, get rich quick schemes and so forth. And, you really want to look at what they've done, what they've accomplished and so forth. Most of them, nothing. They're just good at selling you on whatever, their book, but there are some real authentic people out there, and the way they deliver sometimes is really the game changer for people, is to really understand, a lot of stuff that I talk about. I'm not telling it any differently. I just have my own slant on those things.
Right.
Where, some people are just repeating lines over and over again, not getting much from it.
Right. So. Exactly. And I think that's a big thing that you bring to the picture, especially with this podcast, is that it's as of right now, there's a certain segment of an industry that is familiar with you and what you've done, and we're in the process of attempting to get more exposure on that. But the thing is that you've had your successes. Your successes are out there more or less publicly, that people are able to to see, and it's not rehashed information. I think the wisdom that you've shared with me, that you've shared with others, is coming from a point of view that, hey, this is not just somebody talking about this stuff. This is not just rehash. These are the things that have worked for me. These are the things that I've seen in my, the last, 30 years of your life, more or less, putting businesses together, realizing what works, what things, don't work. And a lot of your points of view, I guess you can say, are similar to what a lot of people say, but they're also contrarian to what a lot of people say. How do you think that kind of happened? Was it just experience that caused you to realize, like, hey, there's some really good things here, there's some not really good things in this philosophy, or this philosophy is kind of like what you said right in the very beginning, is you have to break down some of these quotes and really look at what they mean, or what they were trying to convey.
Right. And try to digest them. I think, again, we talked about wisdom. Wisdom isn't something mystical. Wisdom is really, for me, my definition of wisdom is actually going through pain and coming out the other end and being able to tell the story.
Sure.
Right. So wisdom to me is not this mystical thing. This is this guy's a mystic and he's got the wisdom. My wisdom is really built around going through experiences and understanding other people's experiences as well. And, trying not to make the same mistake. And I think what we're doing in starting with the podcast and some of the things we're going to do, we really want to help people who want to be entrepreneurs, who are, or who are entrepreneurs, but need to go to the next level,
right?
Or want to become one. We're taking them, and for me, it goes back to my social purpose. I love to see people create things. There's nothing better when a person has created something that they can put their arms around and go, this is my creation. This is something that's all mine. So there's an excitement about what we're doing right now. We're weaving through it, trying to figure it all out. But I know it all kind of plays off of the social purpose entrepreneur scenario. And I think, again, going back to wisdom, it's earned. It's earned because, you're being dragged through the mud. I don't think you can gain wisdom unless you hit the bottom.
Right.
I don't think wisdom could come to anyone, just anyone. You have to go through things, because you have to tell the story.
Right.
That's the wisdom.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the wisest people are the ones that went through the most amount of issues.
Yeah.
And then at the same side, or if you really think about it, you can learn a lot and gain your own wisdom by watching the failures or the issues that other people have. I mean, you've said that in some of the other episodes, with even some of the stuff with your own family.
Yep.
That you saw, hey, these things worked very, very well, but these things didn't, and you were kind of realized, these are the things I need to make sure that I don't do, or don't follow down that same path or whatever. So I think wisdom can be shared from all different angles.
Yep.
So I think people that are listening to this now or whenever in the future, there's wisdom that they have as well, that they might not even realize that they have, or that they've learned, and experiences that they've worked themselves through.
Yeah.
That people need to know or want to know,
or
could benefit them in some way.
Yeah.
And that comes down to having a purpose, having some kind of a reason to be able to out there to share. These are the things that you should be aware of, know of. These are the things you're going to go through. Whether or not you find a mentor that's very wise, who has learned from, being through the shit and working their way out, or maybe still currently dealing with something and figuring out, okay, I've become more and more wise knowing that these are the things that I can't do anymore.
Right.
And trying to work their way out of it.
Yeah. I mean, again, wisdom, there's two ways to gain wisdom. One is to really understand and look ahead. If you're walking down a path and there's three people ahead of you and a rock falls on the first person's head at the same spot, the second person walks there and the rock falls on their head. And then another rock falls on the third person before you. You've just gained wisdom, or you're a complete idiot and you keep walking.
Right.
You've gained wisdom to walk around that area where those rocks seem to be falling down.
Yeah.
So that's a way to gain wisdom. The other way to gain wisdom is being that first guy with the rock on it smashed on his head and going, all right, when I go back through this path, I'm not walking down that area anymore.
Yeah.
So there's two ways to really absorb it. And I think you need both. Yes, you need a great mentor. Yes, that'll help you avoid a good amount of it, but make sure your mentor has someone that has had rocks fall on their head. I think I said this in the last episode, but you don't want somebody to tell you all about Italy and have never been to Italy.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You'd rather have somebody give you a tour of Italy or tell you about the beautiful sights you're going to see on your vacation when they were there maybe 50 times.
Right.
Telling me I've been to Italy, a half dozen times, but I'm not going to give you my story. You're not going to sit and really absorb my story of my trip to my Italy tour, because I've only been there 6 times, 7 times.
Right.
But someone who grew up in Italy and has lived there for 30, 40 years and telling you that story, that's where you're going to gain the wisdom. So you got to be really careful who you listen to, what kind of stuff you absorb, because we only got so much time in our life.
Right. Absolutely.
And we don't want to waste it on people and things that just will not help us move forward.
Sure.
There's a great quote. I think it was Marcus Aurelius, Stoic wisdom. It was about why life is so short. So a lot of people think life is short, and Marcus Aurelius his response was, life isn't short. It's just that we waste a tremendous amount of time doing things that are just wasteful and not living life the right way.
Right.
And so this kind of brings us full circle back to Seth Godin. Seth Godin's real interesting point about one of the things that he pushes is he talks about shipping. It's like, so the word shipping to him, when he starts talking about that, that's actually get moving, get your business moving. You've created something, get it out the door. It doesn't have to be perfect. Get it out the door. You'll perfect. The only way you're going to perfect things is by learning, right? So if you create this beautiful painting and you put that painting out there and people look at it and go, it's okay. It's not great. Now, okay, now I need to do improvements. I need to be, I really like this part about the painting. Good. I'm going to make my next painting really focused around those areas that people like. And now the next piece comes out, not quite exactly where it is, but it's got more interest.
Right.
Now you start asking the question, what do you think? And now you keep moving it along the conveyor belt and getting things out the door. And eventually, and we're going to do this with these podcasts.
Sure.
You may hear the first podcast is not going to be the same as where we are now or where we're going to be. But we need to get it out. We need to ship it. We need to make sure that that people are listening to it, know it's a work in progress. And just like every business. So I think we waste so that life is so short because for people that believe it's too short, because they spend most of the time trying to make everything so perfect before they launch. And this could lead us down the road of talking about early stage companies and you know, and companies that pitch and so forth.
Yeah.
There's always a psychological point to some of these companies, and I'll tell you a little bit about it as we go along. But something I learned even in a meeting today, some people just can't get out of their own way, and it's interesting.
Do you think that some of the people that can't get out of their own way have maybe listened to the wrong wisdom, or maybe haven't tried to figure out or admit that they should be listening to other people sometimes and won't get out of their own way because they feel like their way is the only way, and that prevents them from moving forward? I mean, because I would, really in all aspects of life, if it goes back to the whole thing. Zig Ziglar used to talk about it with the
sales guy,
the roasts in the oven. I think it was Zig Ziglar who came up with that whole thing about, the little girl sees her mom cooking a roast in the oven, or getting ready, and she cuts an inch off each side of the roast and she puts it in the tray. And the little girl asks her mom, Mom, why do you cut an inch off each side? And she's like, oh, well, I got this recipe from your grandmother. You should ask your grandmother. And she goes and asks the grandmother, and the grandmother says, well, great grandma taught me this, ask her. And it ends up being that she asked the great grandmother. The grandmother says, well, my oven was only so wide, so I could only fit in by cutting an inch off each side. So it talks about, okay, it's, things can change, things can progress, and not every way that you think it has to work is the only way that it could work. Right. And that comes with wisdom, with mentorships. Companies are out there now, coaches or mentors are kind of looked at in a weird way in some ways. Some people look at it as kind of a scammy thing, but in other instances, there's companies out there that will go out and hire a COO to handle that. Instead of hiring a coach, they'll bring somebody in that does these different things. And that's because their wisdom, what they've learned at their last position. Sometimes, major companies, hey, come in and, and help us grow ours and so forth. Sure. And they're hiring that wisdom, or they're investing in that kind of information that person has. But I still see a lot of people, and I talk to a lot of people on a regular basis, especially with what I do with the coaching and consulting and so forth, that are set in certain ways. Yeah. And they feel that, well, if I change this, well, then what happens if it doesn't work? And I'm kind of, the philosophy is like, well, but what happens when it does work and gets better? But how do you differentiate the things that actually are real good pieces of information and whatnot? Does it just come down to implementation, or does it come down to speaking to others and what allows you to realize what's good wisdom, what's not wisdom? Is it just doing it yourself?
Yeah. I mean, lack of a better way to describe it is people, you're right about all the above. That some people have their own habits that they can't break. There's also part of that is people have their own philosophies that they seem to want to go by. It bothers me sometimes when I hear entrepreneurs pitch their company or talk about it. And if we do get into longer conversations about their philosophy, because I want to know their philosophy on life. I want to get a good understanding what an entrepreneur, what's a value to that entrepreneur, especially if I'm investing in the entrepreneur. I got to know what's happening there. And I talked about the jockey and the horse, but I want to understand the jockey a little bit. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure he's not on shaky ground when he's on that horse.
Sure.
Because you could really be on shaky ground and then get on top of a shaky horse. Fledgling company is that wild horse. So for me, it's really understanding. I want to know where they're coming from. I want entrepreneurs to be experts at being an entrepreneur. So if they haven't really been absorbing some of the literature that's out there or working with someone to help them be a better entrepreneur, because there's different things you learn. I learned to be an entrepreneur on the ground doing it, and the failures taught me that was my teacher, right? In the beginning, I had no one. So the failure was my teacher, not to make that same mistake again, even though a few times I kept going down the same road as I talked about, but eventually was able to ride the horse. But ultimately, those experiences taught me, but it really becomes an issue when someone comes and tries to raise money and they're not really absorbed in the entrepreneurial world. For me, that those experiences, really gave me the ability to learn. The one big jump for me was, and I needed help on this one because I figured out the entrepreneur thing. I figured out the entrepreneur founder scenario. Didn't know about the CEO scenario. So I worked really, really hard, and I used a coach. I talked about Richard Magid. We use his name through a lot of these programs. And Richard, really helped me develop from a CEO and an entrepreneur and founder to a CEO. And when I made that leap, that was one of my proudest leaps because I was stuck in this, like, in the middle of the woods scenario. And I was a high level thinker. But when I got caught up in only me and only I can solve these problems, as soon as you start saying that, you're in trouble. Me and me alone could solve these problems. That's not a good idea. A good idea is to try to figure out how I can build this business and actually bring certain people in and help me grow the business and actually become that CEO, become the visionary of the company. At the same time, be able to run that company day in and day out and inspire people. And part of being a CEO and a founder of a company is really inspiring people and wanting people to really work under you. That you want them to be as good. My philosophy always is, I want them to be as good or better than me. Like, I want them to perform their job even better than I perform my job.
Right.
So that was a big shift for me. Shift, not shit.
Right.
Big shift for me was to actually, be able to move up and become a CEO.
What would you say is the major difference between founder to CEO? What is the thing that changes that position or that kind of that concept?
Well, I guess it's probably a little bit more of being a dreamer than the doer. You got to have both as CEO. You got to, and you do need to be, your head needs to be 30,000 feet above, and then you got to get down to 5,000 feet. You got to be able to navigate up and down because you're working with people that are at different view levels of the business. So you got to be able to move it through the process and go back up. And so I think the difference is dealing with people. Being a CEO is dealing with employees and dealing with customers, but dealing with people as a CEO as opposed to an entrepreneur, which is a little bit more in the dream stage of a business. A lot of those people that can't kind of move to the CEO level of founding, of starting a business they call them the founders or the product expert, and they run that product. And that happens and that works out well.
Yeah.
For a majority of them, because you could go, okay, I built a company and I need to bring in a CEO now.
Right.
Where in my situation, I built this company, I needed to bring in a CEO, but maybe I could turn into a CEO. And that's what I was able to do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you see, some of those companies that a founder who was a CEO steps down or replaces themselves with a new CEO, that's not necessarily bad. I think a lot of people that are unfamiliar with it worry about that. So when Susan, who was the CEO of YouTube, and I always pronounce her last name wrong, but she stepped away from the CEO position a few months back. And a lot of people worried, like, okay, what does this mean to YouTube that now she's stepping away? in your philosophy or in your experience or your wisdom, I guess you can say, it's not necessarily a bad thing when a founder or original CEO steps down and replaces it with somebody else. Yeah. Is that usually to help the company grow or take it into a different direction?
It should be, right? It should be. It should be, but we don't know the backstory, right, of that particular one, or why a CEO steps down and becomes chairman. Sometimes they're just, exhausted. They've done it for so long.
Sure.
They just want to move on.
Right.
And they want to be, the board chairman.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, being a CEO is exhausting. It's tough. I don't know if I'll go back into that role again as much as I, want to spend more of my time helping people, helping entrepreneurs, and, devoting our, time and service to different things, including some nonprofits that I contribute to and get involved in. But, and that's because I've done it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I know if I get, if I'm starting a new business and I get called back in to be the CEO, because there is not, of course I would take it. So I'm not saying no to anything, but I would absolutely, there's just so many reasons why people will step away from being CEO. One is that it's reached a point where you can't run the company anymore. You've got to your level of where you think you can take it, and to sell it or hire a new CEO is a good step. Somebody that's experienced that can come in and help you. So those are all different ways.
That's actually really interesting that you say that. Is when you would decide, do I bring in a CEO that could bring the company to the level that I know it can get to? That, I've reached my peak. I kind of can't go any further. Do I now sell the company, or do I bring in somebody that can take it to that next level? Maybe, it's gone from a 6-figure side hustle to now a $1 million company. You're able to grow it to, $5 million a year or something like that. Now you're saying, okay, I really see if we could, now that, like you talk about traction, now they're able to scale out more. What would be the deciding factor for you to say, is it worth selling it, or is it worth bringing somebody in to bring it to a $20 to $50 million a year company?
Yeah. What's the tripwire, right? So for me with NHA, the tripwire was the offer. But reality is I probably wouldn't even have considered that unless I felt like, from an operational standpoint of the company, I felt like I either needed to bring in a COO, a full-time COO. I did have an outsourced COO.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an operations director. But ultimately, for that business, I needed to make a major commitment, and which I was about to do until of course, I got an offer.
Sure.
And that changed everything. So that really ultimately for me, it was just, that was the tripwire. It was more the offer. But in the back of my mind, I was like, all right, you know what? There's a lot of work to do. We got to, we don't want the carts falling off the wheels falling off the cart.
Yeah.
Because the business was growing. I was doing my job as CEO and building that business and so forth, but we couldn't, we would get to a point where we'd always have to play catch up. It's almost like you'd have to put the brakes on and go, okay, let's catch up. And I don't like putting the brakes on for long. So it was quick breaks, try to catch up. All right, you're almost here. Let me go.
Gotcha.
So I was always chasing. So, so the move was, making that decision. What decision you make, like you asked, do you do it? Do you sell it? Do you sell the business? Do you bring somebody in? Those are all options. So, for me, it was, the option was, let's do this. I think I could do something again in the future,
right?
Which, knock on wood, turned out to be the right thing. But
do you think that was based off of more of the fact that you went from the founder position to a CEO and you understood it more to make that decision of, yeah, I think it's better off selling than trying to bring in somebody else to grow this to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I made key hires and brought in great people through the process of the business. But when, it was just literally for me, that particular deal was a toss up. Like I could have brought in a chief operating officer to work under me. I think I told you I went through a few COOs, so my experience with them didn't work out as well.
Right.
So it was just an easier thought to let's sell, and it certainly was a life changer. Selling the business and cashing out was a life changer in all aspects. For family, after all the years of struggling, it was kind of like, oof. My God, I got here.
Right.
But once you get there, it's just, there's always more challenges. And I knew that was going to be my life.
Right. And I've not been in the position to sell a business as of this point. I've gotten into the point of buying out a partner in a business that I was part of at one point, which was a very, very simple type of negotiation. He wanted out. I still
that
wanted
was the simple part. He wanted out.
Yeah, he wanted out, and there was conversation about maybe just kind of selling it. We were going through some issues with it, and I still saw the potential. He had wanted to kind of branch off and do some other things anyway, so it was a very easy piece for me to acquire his half of the business at that point. And and I'm glad I did. It worked out for me, in the long run. And also he was able to grow his own thing too and become very successful in that aspect as well. But I guess kind of the question that I have, or the things that kind of make me think about it, is how much of NHA was one of the biggest acquisition sales that you went through. That, like you said, was like the baby that you kind of grew and then had to give to somebody else. How much of that sale in that whole process got you interested in actually going into, because you started the next kind of as an angel investor and then progressively moved into more like VC type of stuff. Did the sale of NHA play a role in that at all? Or was it kind of like, this is interesting, I want to learn more about this, and that's how you fell into it? Or did you just say, now that I've been through this, successfully, I want to start doing this kind of stuff as well, because maybe it allowed you to still be on the journey? I know that's a big thing, that when people have that, is that the journey is the thing, that the selling, the profit that you make, the money that you make from the sale is like, okay, cool. What are you going to do? I'm going to go retire. And then a couple of weeks later, a lot of people are like, man, I the journey was the best part. So did that kind of push you into the sale of NHA, push you into the VC type of stuff?
Yeah, it did. I really, truly love the story. And I did it with my partners in this last, these last two businesses with the same two partners. I wanted them, just like when I invest in a company, or, what I do with my partners, my conversation was always like, I'd like to see you guys, cash out of this business and feel the feeling that I went through, because it's hard to explain, the accomplishment, not the, millions of dollars, whatever it is. Those are all great, but that's not I don't count my success in my dollars that I have in the bank. God has been good to me. Things have worked out very well. Business has grown so much, and I was able to cash out and do that. But the real reality is, it's that feeling of accomplishment, that you built something that somebody wants, that somebody, wants to dig in and really build the company even more. And at the same time, you've created something of value, because it's really our purpose to be able to create value. So, and again, not financial value, but just value to whether it's your customers or your acquirers.
Yeah.
So for me, it was that. It was, I really enjoyed early stage investing. For me, is a way for me to actually literally work with people, kind of partners. Some of them, some of the investments I do, I'm actively involved. Some of them I'll be involved only for a short time and then go, all right, you can put me on the sidelines here. I can't help you this far down the road. So there's so many different relationships I have with the companies I've invested in, that I invest in now, that they're everywhere, from, talking somebody off the roof when things are, crazy, to literally check-ins, every 3-6 months. So, and then always, it's not always like, hey, I'm going to invest in this company, I'm going to help them and so forth. And then sometimes there's other companies I may go, I'm going to invest, but I don't know if I could be helpful. And I end up doing a lot of work with them. So it's no telling. It's just, that's kind of a toss up. Whatever happens. Certainly in an industry that I know about, investing in it is always easy and more fun for me, because I could help them through experience,
right,
in the industry. Hopefully I can help them with wisdom, going the other way as well. So
have you, and I would assume that this is probably a yes, but has there been certain companies or industry that you've invested in that you've gained wisdom from looking at it now and saying, oh, wow, like I never knew this before. This is pretty interesting. Is there something that stands out to you that is like a piece that, or maybe it's a couple things that are just like, oh, this is an interesting thing to I understand better.
Well, what? I've gotten really good. This may sound negative. I've gotten really good at knowing what's not going to work, as opposed to what's going to work. I always take things from a different angle. But for me, sometimes these sexy, exciting businesses that come up are just not what you think they're going to be. And I've learned what you don't know is don't get so excited over the concept. Get more excited. Again, it keeps going back to the entrepreneur. Get excited from the jockey, not the horse.
Right.
Because those industries can excite you and go, oh my God, especially when somebody's presenting it early on as an investor, you'd lean toward that and go, wow, this is a huge market. If they get 1% of this market, they're going to, and a lot of times it never actually happens.
Right.
So yeah, ultimately for me, it's understanding that sometimes these businesses that look like they're no fail, they're not going to, I can really look at those. I do have a skill being able to look at them and go, I don't think it's going to happen. A lot of it has to do with the entrepreneur. Like, I don't think this person could pull that off. As much as they're telling us the story, once you understand, let them pitch and start talking to them, you start getting a view of, this person's, it's not going to go anywhere. And I made mistakes that way. So this is, again, wisdom learned through my investments.
Right. Okay. So thinking about what you just said about certain things and looking kind of like, wow, this is a really attractive looking business, or the business model or the idea behind it. And even if they only get, 1 or 2%, that could be gigantic. You're talking, you can go from, millions to multi-millions or something. Are there certain industries that stand out to you now that look very interesting, but you're still not quite sure about, or emerging industries or things like that you're like, this could be very, very interesting down the road? The right entrepreneur could take this to the next level.
Yeah. I mean, I think focus on industries. I'll give you one right out of the oven, conversation I had today. So that this is a good one. And this is a company in the entertainment space, in jobs in the entertainment space. And this is, what they're doing is creating this network, for jobs and for organizations that are hiring. This is Broadway, opera, all these areas. And I was impressed with the company because it was almost like a LinkedIn, but it was a really focused LinkedIn. I love the concept. Again, I just met the entrepreneur. I was impressed with her today. But what I saw there was that there's a focus. Like LinkedIn seems to be everything for everybody, right? So I can really get a great connection. At the same time, I can also get a guy that wants to sell me insurance,
Sure.
So LinkedIn seems to be this yes, they're trying to create these separate groups, but when you think of LinkedIn, you kind of think of the vast,
very broad,
very broad.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, it was interesting to see a company that's really focused in an industry and has gained traction, which was really impressive. For that particular business, was users are using the platform. People are on the platform. There's things being posted. They share, So I won't go too deep into the business. I don't want to talk about the business as much as that. I do see, when you're able to look at some mass markets that are out there, how you can focus those markets to create a model that is, again, this is for entertainers and Broadway and, orchestra to all the way to opera singers and ballet. So ultimately, it's a really well-focused job search / social network process and transactional process that goes actually through the program. So this was a unique business. So there's a good one that's a good example of a business that is out there. I mean, other businesses like, digital, creation and doing things online. I mean, those businesses are, from lifestyle businesses that you could build to actually large multi-billion-dollar businesses that have yet to be created. I think AI is an opportunity. I mean, obviously we know that there's some fear about AI, but the one fear I don't think we should push away is the fear that it's coming, and we have to control it. We have to do the right things. And, I watched 60 Minutes about the fears of it and so forth. That was just on recently. But I also look at it as a huge opportunity where people are going to be either retrained. There are going to be some jobs that go away, but there'll probably be tenfold jobs coming in from it.
Right.
So we have to look at those things and accept those things. The internet is not a threat. It became a tool that we use, another tool.
Right.
And I think AI is going to be a tool. It's not going to run the world. I just don't see it. That's my opinion. I think it's going to be a tool, and I think we will balance it out. I think it's a little bit of the Wild West right now.
Sure.
So is the internet.
Right.
And I think we've gotten better handle on the internet. There are some things we haven't completely controlled, but ultimately I think we're getting better and better at that. And we will tackle the AI thing. And again, AI being a business, a tool in businesses that I would look to invest in as a tool, not as a
right,
not as an entree.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing with AI is you have the movies out there, Terminator and all that kind of stuff that talk about how AI took over. And but I mean I talk about this a lot too with the students that I work with, especially when they're trying to put together their stuff for their content creation and so forth. How much can I utilize things like ChatGPT or these large language models to help me write a script or that. And I tell them, I said, they're great tools for collaboration. It's like having a writing partner that is way smarter than you are, that as long as you ask it the right questions can provide you with a ton of information. I also have friends that are terrified of AI because they're thinking, okay, these things are going to take away my job.
Yeah.
And I automatically kind of go to it that there's going to be some entrepreneurs out there that are worrying about the same thing, but then are going to take the matters into their own hand and say, okay, well, listen, like ChatGPT, and I don't know the exact stats, but they had one of the most recent versions of ChatGPT take the bar exam for lawyers, and it got a higher score than a lot of lawyers get. It averaged like 92% or whatever it was.
Continual learning. It really gains wisdom. Right. That's really what it's set out to do, is just actually, it starts out like a child and builds, but I mean, it takes the wisdom. I mean, it learns things very quickly,
right?
Probably faster than the human, but again, put it in perspective. Perspective of it is that you need to use it. When you're using it, use it as a tool. Don't be addicted to it.
Yeah.
Like everything else. Anything in moderation is good.
Right.
You go over that, you become a junkie to it.
Right.
And you don't want to do that. You don't want to rely on that.
Sure.
Because it will take over your life.
Right.
Because you're going to let it. You're going to make it. So you need it for certain things. You again, the tool of it is beautiful. And I think that if we can have that as more of a way to look at it, things will really evolve.
Right. Absolutely. And I think there's going to be people, kind of going back to what I was saying, there's going to be those entrepreneurs that are in positions, I could see it being a big thing with attorneys. Sure. Paralegals might be like, okay, people can now go online and utilize ChatGPT and ask questions and get some pretty good answers, or utilize Claude or even Google Bard now. Just, when you're just talking about AI as far as a large language model, that there's going to be people that are saying, okay, well, I could lose my job here. A smart entrepreneur or intrapreneur could sit there and say, okay, well, what's a way to protect myself?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to create something that I can license out to these other companies to be able to use. So a chatbot that you can sell to attorneys, so that people can go in and ask questions directly on their website and get information without there needing to be that human touch that lead people down the as far as leads or whatever it might be. So yeah, I agree with you that market, that industry is, there's certain things to be concerned about, of course, but there's also a lot of opportunity there. And think about agriculture. At one point people were just using, rakes and hoes and shovels. And then people started to create, then they created the plow, that was, dragged by by an ox. And then the tractor was born. And then now tractors are being run by.
The problem is the ox lost his job. But,
the ox lost his job. That's true. Became somebody's dinner or something, whatever it might have been. But the agricultural field has grown tremendously since the birth of technology and being able to even, now a lot of those machines don't even have to be driven by a person. It's all handled by satellite and GPS and all that kind of stuff. But it's grown, and the industry has grown because now there needs to be suppliers that supply the tractors, that build them, the parts and all that kind of stuff. So AI, I think, will, like you said, will grow new positions, new jobs. And it's just the ultimate, it's just how things happen.
It's just one more thing that we've created that we're going to fit into society.
Yeah.
The other industry that I think has gone through a huge change and will go on through more is education. Education being, I think there's new ways of learning. I think there are, programs. I mean, you and I are working on programs for entrepreneurs. I think this is the new way of educating people. And, I think it's so important that you don't need to be sitting in a classroom. And, I didn't finish college. I don't think you did either, right?
No.
Good. Welcome to the world. Welcome to, I didn't finish college, not because I wasn't, financially I couldn't finish college anyway, but ultimately, for me, it just wasn't for me. It really wasn't for me at the time. And I had to learn and get beat up, and take my lumps on my own. I went to school for a few years, played sports, played football and so forth. And then I made my decision that I wasn't going to go back, and made the right move and went and got my first job and, went from there. So education, but I would have benefited from these short, mentorship type education programs that are out there.
Right.
Would have been great for a person like a guy like me.
Sure.
And I think that is going to be the new frontier as we move forward, is learning kind of hands-on, really understanding that the education that we need to learn are real basic things, but we need to absorb them and breathe them and feel them, and not sit in a classroom and just, fall asleep.
Right.
Because you have a hangover from the night before.
Right. Or just forced to have to take those classes to that's part of the curriculum and things like that.
Yeah.
Being able to pick. And I think that's why there are, there's, numerous people that are successful that, have gone to college and graduated and built success. But there's also a tremendous amount of people out there that have not, that had a certain vision, and they realized this, it wasn't just the, like Michael Dell, for instance, who started Dell Computers from his dorm room and selling these computers. And, I'm not sure if he graduated or not, but the fact is that he built this.
I don't believe he did. I don't believe he did. And I don't, just about Bill Gates, left school, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, the list goes on of people that didn't complete, formal education and ended up moving in and building an amazingly, Steve Jobs, they're all people that didn't get, at the time I didn't know any of these people. When I left school, I really felt like I wasn't going to be successful. I didn't have a lot of huge dreams for myself when I left school. I kind of was just discombobulated and finally got my footing.
Right. When it comes to education too, I think being able to choose, and that's, I think what makes, bringing a person on or hiring a mentor or hiring a coach or finding somebody that can, that educates you because of the wisdom. I mean, really, if that's education is really wisdom being passed down from one person to the next. I mean, that's really what education is. You have a teacher that teaches you the lesson based off of what they know about it. And, granted, they're relying on books and courses or classes and curricula and all that kind of stuff in order to do that. But it really is, this is what we learned. This is what we pass down. This is what we teach you and so forth.
Yeah.
And then there's the people that say, but what other things can we do with this? And that's when, they diverge into the path that's not so often followed.
Yeah.
That ambiguous path that they become irrationally passionate about and say, okay, I need to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that requires that, where do I put my focus? Do I put my focus on the normal path of staying in college or finishing this out and doing this? Or do I really put, my eggs in this basket and make this thing work? And that's a big decision that I think people need to make. But I see that I see that philosophy changing now slightly. I don't think it's as 10 years ago it was still very much go to school, go get a job, get a 401k and all that kind of stuff. I think that's changing a bit more as time goes on. It's not entirely where everybody believes that, but people are becoming more lenient on that belief, I think.
Yeah, and I think the hard line of everybody needs to go to college is just, that's very old fashioned. It's not true. And it's not just that you don't go to school because you can learn a trade and be a plumber, which is, it's successful. Very good plumbers make great money.
Sure.
But you can be an entrepreneur and you could be a CEO and you can be all these other things. You don't necessarily need you're not getting that experience in college. Yes, college does teach you discipline. It teaches you the ability to be able to, commit to things. So it really does create consistency. Be in class on time, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And then, the ability to be able to absorb things and learn and communicate and social skills. And going to college is, there's a whole nother piece to that, is growing up to be an adult. And so you experiment with alcohol or whatever else.
Right.
Learn what you don't like, what you do like, and where you're going. So, I'm not putting down college. For me, it just wasn't in the cards. And for you, obviously. But ultimately, it's something, that's believable. I hope people, still absorb college and go through college. There's nothing better than having that diploma behind you. But, does everybody need it? No, that's really the way I look at
it. Do you think that sometimes college now in certain industries, I could see obviously college for, being an attorney, being a doctor, things like that, where college is necessary, absolutely required. But do you think in a lot of other situations now, in your experience, especially dealing with different companies and, and pitches from different entrepreneurs and so forth, do you think that in a lot of ways that it's more about trying to keep people compliant to a certain set of rules that now people are starting to realize we don't have to be as compliant anymore. We can be I don't want to say the rule breakers and kind of use that whole, Steve Jobs thing that he said back in the day, but even the mentality of, the 5-day kind of work week and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was apparently, and I don't know how true this is, but that was an idea created back in the early 1900s as far as, hey, I don't want people, I don't want thinkers, I want workers. Mm-hmm. And that whole philosophy was, hey, an 8-hour day, 9 to 5, you work in the factory, you work in this.
Trained you to work the 9 to 5. Right,
and just become compliant to that.
Yeah, that's what that's what I understand as well. Yeah. You want to create, you don't want to, I guess as a country and as multiple countries do, we've created schools and education, which is the best thing in the world.
Sure.
That's got people educated faster. So there is a piece there that they're teaching people how to, whether it's complying, and maybe they're teaching civility. You got to get it up. You got to get dressed. You got to raise your hand. You got to,
sure.
There's a civility factor there. There's so many different things that education teaches you. In the way it is right now, I think it's not where it's going to be in the next. I don't think it is great where it is right now. I came out of his last business was in the education mental health sector.
Right.
And we've got so many mental health problems going on in K-12 and then early college. So there are so many things. And the reason why education and schools are picking up this mental health issue is because these kids spend the majority of their day there. So if you got to point the finger at mental health issues, you got to go to schools responsible. That's a political thing, and we'll let that, play out. But ultimately, schools are caught in this factor of they got kids in school that bully. This is where you have your relationships. So,
yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. But ultimately, I think you're right. I think, we created it to keep people out of trouble more than anything.
Sure.
In the beginning, I think.
So if we think about that whole philosophy of, I don't want a country of thinkers, I want a country of workers. You now, with your experience and your results with businesses and so forth, do you want thinkers, or do you want workers, or do you feel that there's certain people that are good at one and better at the other, vice versa, and you want a mix of those, or do you want people that can think on their own?
Yeah, you want people to think on their own. Everyone needs to be able to think on their own. The days of the assembly line person, even nowadays, still needs to understand the technology that's going on in the assembly line.
Right.
So you got to be a thinker to work anywhere.
Sure. Right.
So that being said, there are people that have different skills. There are people out there that have, that are great with their hands, and they could be amazing plumbers or amazing electricians, or or build a pool, or what, you name it. And that takes, nowadays, it takes a lot of, technology to even understand some of this.
Sure.
How much cement goes in the pool when they're building a pool.
Right.
Or what electrical box, that stuff. Like when we have lights, when lights don't work in the house or something, I got to go down to that box. My heart's beating 100 miles an hour. I can't figure that out.
Sure.
I mean, for the life of me,
right,
I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
So, there, and I'm in awe of people like that. I mean, we talked a few episodes back, we talked about the restaurant industry. I don't invest in the restaurant industry because I'm in awe. I actually am. It's almost like when I watch a great chef or hear about this great restaurant, I get so excited because I really love the science it takes and the hard work. I really, really respect a great chef, a great run restaurant, a great waiter, waitress that five in a Michelin star restaurant or whatever, or even in a great restaurant, doesn't have to be Michelin star, but I respect that they're so good at what they do. I'm even in awe when a waiter comes in and asks me for my order and doesn't write it down.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't, my brain is so absorbed with so many things that I would never be able to take order from 6 people and go in the back and repeat the order and actually bring it back out.
Yeah.
I'm impressed. So there are things that keep me in awe. That I won't even, go down that road.
Right.
I've read some really cool books about restaurants and so I got a great understanding of it. Doesn't mean I'm going to invest in the industry.
Right.
Because I'm still in awe of it.
Right. And you do that a lot. I mean, you read a lot of books that are in different industries or not, like you said, even The Road Less Traveled is a book that it's not necessarily a business book.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you gain insights and wisdom really from these other things as well. And I guess you kind of, put them together and create an amalgamation of all these different pieces that you learn from different industries. And so how much has that played into some of the stuff that you've done with the VC, as far as also looking at, some of that stuff that you've learned from absorbing these different pieces of these books that you've read, that you've talked about, different entrepreneurs that you've met, different businesses that you've met, and look at and say, okay, I've seen this before, where I feel this is almost like VC deja vu.
Yeah.
Does that cause you to make certain decisions, right, wrong, or indifferent, or does it really come down to the person?
I mean, it definitely comes down to the person. I mean, we invested in a company that was sold to Uber that we did very well with. It was totally about that person and his skills, which I was in awe of, the entrepreneur. And there were a couple other entrepreneurs, big exits that we had, that when you look at that entrepreneur, you're like, but I get in awe of them, even the young guys, even the young women, that are really, really good at what they do. Today, like I mentioned today, talking to this one company, I'm excited because I really, really like the way she ran her business, and her answers to questions were just like, it was like, wow, she's got it all put together. Now, ultimately, I'm going to spend more time and understand her a little bit before this will be through the due diligence process of investing in the company. I'm going to ask those questions that I need to. And we also do something interesting in our fund. We also give them a test as well. I understand that you need to know a lot of different things to be successful in life.
Right.
Forget just business. You really need to understand like what makes people tick. So I do like that. I do like reading, psychology books, understanding Stoic wisdom.
Sure.
I'm an avid reader of Stoic wisdom books, and I love all that stuff.
Right.
Going through the barriers, breaking through things. The obstacle is the way. I was thinking that was the name of the book I was thinking of. And things like that I really, really love. I love watching sports. I love watching people. I'm a big football fan. I played football and so forth, but I learned something about that sport. It's about getting knocked on your ass and getting up again. And it's always being knocked on. After every play, I was on the ground. I was always getting up.
Right.
If your goal is to not ever be on the ground, don't play football.
Right.
And if your goal is not to fail as an entrepreneur, don't be an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Because you're likely going to fail.
Right.
If you again, as M. Scott Peck said in The Road Less Traveled, if your goal is to seek a higher level, spiritual level, or higher level as a thinker in life, and really understanding, and maybe a philosopher, or maybe you have to understand that you're going to go through more pain. You're going to deal with more knockdowns on your butt. You're going to deal with more getting dragged through the mud.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do that, you stop, right? You stop. And I'm not judging anyone, but if you don't want to go to a higher level in life, you just quit. And for me, quitting's not an option. It's
right.
just not built that way.
Right.
Right. I know you're not. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been through ups and downs, and I think, those are the things that make you appreciate the ups. Because if you don't have the downs, there's not really a way to. The journey isn't really a journey. It's just it's a stroll.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
Going back to to the businesses you were talking about today, because I think this is kind of a good way to also maybe wrap up this episode.
Sure.
But you've talked about before about entrepreneurs that kind of the E-myth also is something that you've mentioned. The woman that the entrepreneur behind this business, she niched down quite a bit. Obviously, she got very specific with it. It's not very broad like LinkedIn. It's more towards the entertainment industry, more specifically like Broadway type of things, not necessarily movies and things like that. Was she an expert in that field, or she just niched down from something that she was an expert in something else and said, "Hey, these are two industries that need to be bridged together"?
She was actually a performer. So yeah. So she has walked the walk. Which is obviously you love that when someone can that's finding another new mousetrap, right?
Right.
Instead of going on LinkedIn and trying to find people to work within your whatever, you're running an opera and you're looking for a singer, whatever it is. I don't know all the ins and outs. It's
sure.
just met her today.
Right.
But understand, but I do know that it's a process to be able to find the right people. You got the industry and whatever, but ultimately she's creating a platform where they can all kind of live,
right,
and communicate and be hired, and and transactions through that. So I look at her as I was a different entrepreneur. I was an outsider. I was an outsider that looked at things differently. But ultimately, it's the drive that I saw in her that makes things work.
Right.
That was the good thing.
And is that something that you kind of look for more now? Is somebody that's more in the industry that's trying to create something that's more specific to there's a gap and this fills it, or this is what I specialize in and I feel that this is a gap that needs to be filled, where they're more of an expert in the technology or whatever it might be behind it, as opposed to an expert in the actual field?
Well, this particular person was an expert in the field, and I think she built out the technology based on her ideas of what, and had the right people help her. I still go back to the entrepreneur because that's what intrigued me about her. Wasn't strictly that she was in the industry and she found she has a better idea. It was the entrepreneurial. Again, the initial, this is only early. So the initial reaction to questions and so forth that impressed me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I think that, that really goes back to understanding. But I'm sure that, when you ask certain questions, especially some of those more difficult, harder to answer questions that maybe they're not anticipating, what are the hurdles that you've gotten over, things like that. That really goes back to, to belief in themselves, belief in what they're doing. Really goes with mindset. And that's why, I think hearing, from somebody like you that has, successfully created businesses, sold businesses, is a very successful human being, and realizing that, hey, these beliefs that I've learned, that I've understood, this wisdom that I've kept, right, or, wisdom that I pushed out and said, listen, I don't want this stuck in my head anymore.
Yeah.
I need to figure out a different way to look at this or whatever. It's a very interesting thing to see how much belief and mindset and certain things help, an entrepreneur move forward, get traction, scale, whatever it might be. But it amazes me how much the brain plays a part into it. Not the knowledge that they have about the tech or the industry or whatever, but just the brains behind their thought process.
Yeah, and I think the more people I think the success kind of wrapping this together, the success of the entrepreneur is is being able to endure, no's and, rejections and failure, being able to endure that. There are a lot of people that get that, they get through it, and then they go, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to go work for somebody, which is, which is fine. They learn, they got their experience. Now they want to go on. What I constantly did, and I'll say this a lot of times, nobody else would hire me. So I stayed in there, stayed in the game.
Right.
But ultimately I did overcome the no's and the rejections and the failures constantly.
Right.
That was probably the best thing, was my consistency to get up, my discipline to get up, and to move forward and not be in a position, where, I let that scare me or stop me. I learned my courage that way. I've learned my discipline. I've learned my, wisdom, and I did all the right things. I did what I needed to do to overcome the storm.
Right.
So, made it through.
Yeah. And with all that, it was wisdom learned, wisdom earned from being through, every step of the process and learning all that, and now being able to share that. So again, Jon, this was a fun conversation. I really, as much as this is a podcast for people to listen to, I really, always like having these conversations with you. It's wisdom that I want to know, and you're able to share it in such a cool, and easy way to, kind of understand. And again, I appreciate you spending the time.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you. I learn a lot from you in our conversations and all the stuff we talk about. So
yeah,
I'm still learning.
That's all we can do.
Yeah.
So with that, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.